Oh yes, that was a point that I overlooked. This presentation is going to be on YouTube, and as I understand it, Darren, people can call in and ask to submit questions, correct?
Yeah, it was working last time I tried it.
So we'll wait.
Well, we'll do that. Could you perhaps invite people, or would you like me to make a comment about JCA as a host tonight?
Absolutely.
Great.
Polite.
Thanks very much, everyone. For those who are unaware, this event tonight is being hosted by the Johnsonville Community Association. The association's open to all residents of Johnsonville and Raroa. We meet on the last Wednesday of the month from February through to November, 7:30 in this very community centre's room 2, 1. One of the rooms in here. If you aren't on our yes, thank you. If you're not already on our mailing list and you'd like to be, please do put your name down at the front of the room. We've got a mailing list there. We promise not to spam you. JCA has, over the years, contributed quite a lot to community things such as events like this, but also we've been putting a lot of effort into developing a walking track between Middleton Road and McClintock Street. And Broderick, thank you. And we are, I'm having a blank, but I promise you we do good things. So, before I was gone too long, I'll hand back to Warren because I believe we are now live.
We're now live, is that correct, Darren?
Yeah.
We are, okay. I'll call upon the first candidate to make his presentation. What I should say is that the sequence in which the candidates are making their presentation has been drawn by ballot by the candidates themselves. And so the first candidate making his presentation is Tony Randle. Tony.
Hello everyone, my name is Tony Randle and I'm standing as an independent candidate for the Northern Ward. It's buzzing. Sorry, can we start again?
Yep, sure.
Okay. Right, so again, my name is Tony Randle. I'm standing as an independent candidate for the Northern Ward, Takapū Northern Ward. I'm the sort of independent candidate that has no party affiliations. I'm not a member of any party. I'm standing because the Northern Ward needs a strong voice in these times of change. We're a growth suburb. We're growth suburbs up here. You know, a lot of population is planned to come to our area, and so you need a voice to make sure that the city invests in the transport, the water infrastructure, green spaces, to support us to keep on growing and to protect the lovely lifestyle that we have up here. We want to ensure that the district targets large areas of Johnsonville and Tawa for high density housing at 6 to 7 storey housing. We want to make sure there are green spaces, playgrounds, that the community facilities are going to support the thousands or more people that are planned for our area, and that the sports facilities also need to be supported. So who am I? I'm a long-time resident. I've lived in Johnsonville for nearly 28 years. I've raised a family, 3 lovely kids. We chose the northern suburbs because it's a great place to raise a family. The schools are good. Yes, the community is full of interesting opportunities and clubs. Johnsonville is our home. Professionally, I'm a business analyst, and so I've led teams, I've led large projects, and I bring some skills, to the job of a councillor. And I've had 20 years of community service. I'm president of the Johnsonville Community Association, it's hosting this meeting. I'm also trustee of the Johnsonville Community Trust. I've had successes. I was involved with the roading upgrades in Johnsonville, new bridges and such like. I led the pushback when the regional council wanted to put a big bus hub up in Johnsonville. I want to make sure. So I'm standing also because the city is not on the right track. It's losing its direction. It needs to bring its priorities back to focus on core services and essential infrastructure. We can't just keep raising rates to solve the next round of problems. And it needs to be more democratic in its engagement because it needs to work for you as it makes changes. I do support change, but it must be socially, environmentally and economically sustainable. We need a council focused on delivering core services, not political agendas. And if this is what you want as a future council, please vote for an independent candidate. Please vote number 1 for Tony Randle. Thank you. Yes, but I thought it was actually 4 minutes, not 3.
Thank you very much, Tony. I now ask Robyn Parkinson to come up and make her presentation.
Apologies, just on the wrong button. My stopwatch is going the same as yours. Tēnā koutou katoa. Good evening. My name's Robyn Parkinson. This is the first time I'm standing for council, but unusually I've got 6 years experience in local government. I've been that long on the Tawa Community Board and the last 3 as chair. And it's been 3 years now since someone on the other side of the world who's well known and well respected stood before the UK Parliamentary Committee on climate change and said these words about climate change: "We cannot be radical enough." That was Sir David Attenborough, and that was 3 years ago. I'm proud to be standing as the first Green Party candidate in this ward for 12 years, and I see nothing bad in showing you what my values are and where my priorities are, and they are climate change action more urgently than is currently being done. We need this. I need to be able to look my children and one day my grandchildren, I hope, in the eye, and I want my grandchildren to be able to look their grandchildren in the eye and be able to say, we did all we could. But we need to do so much more than is being done at the moment, and we need to pay the cost now rather than the far greater cost that will come later. Now, the Green Party is not, and I am not naive. We know these are difficult changes that need to happen. They impact everybody. They're going to impact everybody, whether you like it or not, and whether you want to pay the cost now or not. Climate change is upon us. We have to deal with it with great urgency. And so, as part of a party that spent decades researching and advocating for and learning about the ways to counter climate change, I can bring not just what I know to the party, not just what I know around the council table, because at the end, no one person can be the expert in such complex and big decisions that the council has to make. And the other thing I want to touch on tonight is a question that I hope is uppermost in all of your minds, and that is, how can you be sure that the candidates that you are voting for have got what it takes to be the leader around that council table? Because I've seen what it's like up closer than a lot of people, and it is very tough. It's very demanding, it's very complex, and it's not nearly as simple as most people would like to think it is. And so I'm going to share with you something quite personal, and something that I asked myself last year, and I wouldn't normally share this in public, but I believe you have a right to know. I went and approached a leadership coach last year. I wanted to answer that question: how do I know that I've got what it takes? And she happened to be a professional who normally deals with chief executives and high-level management across the country, highly professional woman. And she strongly encouraged me to do a globally recognised leadership assessment, which, after some thought, I did, and I'm very glad I did. It came as a huge surprise to me on 2 fronts. One was the kind of qualities that I assumed that a lot of leaders have, statistically, most leaders don't have. And that was a shock to me. I thought, gosh, we really desperately need good leadership, and there's very few around. And the other shock was actually how far up the development level I already was. I've spent another year working with her. I'm not taking anything for granted, but what I want to say is if you want to come up afterwards and ask me about that or at any other time, I've got objective proof of leadership skills. I'm not just standing here and saying it. I've had a professional assessment about it, and leadership is key this election. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robyn. I'd like to call upon James Sullivan now for his presentation.
Thank you very much for the Johnsonville Communities Association for organising this and letting all us candidates come up and speak. James Sullivan, I'm a local. I've spent most of my life in Wellington, various places. Grew up in Condie, me and my wife pitched, a few years ago pitched a house just in Johnsonville, just across the State Highway 1. I've spent most of my professional career here as a software developer in Wellington. And there are a lot of upcoming decisions that this next council are going to have to make that are certainly not fun. They're going to be painful. They're going to have very long-term impacts. And this decision process is going to need to involve people who are willing to make decisions that not everyone's going to like, but they're going to be made with the long term in mind. You're going to have to make decisions that sometimes may make life a little bit more difficult in the shorter term to make life a lot better in the longer term. So the two big things that I want to work to push forward with council, and that I think council is positioned to actually make a difference. They can't snap their fingers and suddenly fix the buses. But what they can do is things like allocation of transport infrastructure. We only have so much road space, for example, or so much space for rail. How can we better allocate that for usages that are more equitable across the population, across age ranges? Things such as cycleways, things such as prioritising public transport to improve its reliability. Another big part that I think council can really influence is around housing. Housing affordability is shocking. I have far too many people I know who are successful in their careers and they cannot afford a place anywhere in Wellington. One of the things I think council can help do and to address this or approach this is really around making sure that as we intensify, as we do that sort of thing, that it's done in a useful way, that it's not done in a way that results in grey concrete 12-storey blocks, smaller developments. And this more efficient use of space does make it easier to provide more green space, more forests to everyone to enjoy. And one of the other things is I would like to do is, if elected, to really stay in contact with the communities around Takapū Ward, around Northern Ward, is not simply just going to various events, but having means of communication where people can contact me, can organise phone calls, Zoom, Teams, whatever, so that they can just go on a website, book a slot, and then just have a chat. These are sorts of things I think I really want to drive. From the experience perspective, I've spent over 10 years in software development, working on large projects, small projects, all throughout industries. I've worked on software as a medical device as the technical lead. There's a lot of complexity in those situations you have to deal with, where you have to balance all sorts of levels of knowledge, all sorts of levels of experience, and being able to communicate, to translate, and keep everyone on board and focused on longer-term goals is a skill I think I can bring to the council and to the Takapū Ward to help bring us forward in a good way that brings everyone along. Thank you.
Thank you, James. I'll now ask John Peters and make your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, good evening, everybody. I'm John Peters, and I'm standing for councillor for Northern Takapū ward. I have lived in northern suburb for 22 years. Having lived in Johnsonville, Newlands, and in Tower, I know what issues we have in northern suburb. I'm married to adult children. Son is an accountant, my daughter is an engineer, and my wife a banker. And I'm semi-retired after running a successful construction company. Graduating with a commerce degree, I worked in bank for 12 years. I have pursued further professional studies in construction engineering from Welltech and started my construction company. With my team, I built houses in Newlands, Johnsonville, Lower Hutt, and in Tower. I worked for some time as housing officer and as chief executive officer of a corporation. I will bring my management experience to run the council to achieve more harmonized council that is focused on reducing rates and prioritizing infrastructure spending. I will bring diversity of thought to the table when focusing on issues like rate, public safety, housing affordability, and transport. As an ex-president of Ratepayers Association, I will strive to reduce rates by prudently investing when making decisions that affect ratepayers. I also ran a successful transport business with 15 buses and 30 drivers in Greater Wellington region. The present bus crisis and cycle lane issue is no brainer for me. Current rate rise of 8.9% is way too high as compared to Christchurch 4.65% and Auckland 3.5%. If you cross to Tasman, the rate rises 1% in Perth, 0% in Melbourne. Global Livability Index, Wellington has dropped from 4th place to 50th in 2022. Factors such as the cost of living, healthcare, and infrastructure have all contributed to this. As an elected councillor, I will prioritize council spending, the core facility and infrastructure that improves the lives of Wellingtonians. I am involved with Tower Union Church, the Rotary, and the Safer Communities. What I can promise you is a more livable city, a more transparent and business-friendly council, a performance-driven council who gets things done. Current council has great spinner but no action. In fact, we know that current council is most dysfunctional with a rate of only 12% satisfaction, one of the lowest ever. We, the Northerners, contribute more than $60 million every year as rates. What we got significant in return? One library, Alexmoor Park, and Pukukui Park in Newlands. 84% of our rates are spent elsewhere. Let's get Wellington moving. A $7.5 billion project has no public transport plan for northern suburb. Everything is focused on Wellington train station to airport or the southern to Island Bay side. Not even an airport flyer for us. I get things done. It is what I built my career on. I care deeply for the people of Wellington. I'm not here for a meal ticket. I'm a performance-driven guy. If you want a better council, a strong voice for northern suburb in the council, then please vote for me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I now ask Raveen Annamalai to come up and make this presentation.
Enga mana, enga rio, enga rao rangatira. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. My fellow brothers and sisters, the people of wisdom who are sitting here today, I would like to connect with you. I would like to communicate with you, and I would like to work and collaborate with you. And I see lots of people with wisdom here wants to hear what we want to say and what we want to do and what we want to deliver for the community. First and foremost, I would like to acknowledge all my fellow candidates here, all my fellow candidates on this side who put their hands up to join us to stand up to build a strong foundation for northern suburb. Now, My name is Raveen Annamalai. I'm from Malaysia. I've been 15 over years in this country. Settled down with 3 beautiful children. And thank you for my wife who is sitting here silently observing what I need to do and push forward. And thank you for the support. And ladies and gentlemen, I've been involved in the community sector for the last 20 years. 15 years, and then coming into this country, being part of the Multicultural Council of Wellington as the past president, being the vice president of Multicultural New Zealand, involving myself actively in the Rotary International, and currently holding 2 key roles for my fellow Tamil community. I want to give a lot, I want to do a lot for the people in this suburb that embraced me and my family 15 years ago when we arrived here. Today, I feel it's time that I want to give back to this community. I want to give back my passion with great honesty, transparency, and the compassion that I have for my fellow people. As I said, my humble wish is to connect, communicate, and collaborate with every community board that resides in Northern Ward. Bring active celebrations to this suburb. Work on safety and prevention, crime prevention, which is my primary focus. Get the Johnsonville Mall back in action. Speak to strike, get them for a public forum, and see what we can do. Johnsonville roundabout needs a big attention. It's one of the dangerous roundabouts. I've driven cars in Malaysia. It is still all right, but here at Johnsonville roundabout, I still struggle. So that's one main concern that I want to look at. I want to bring on-demand transportation. Simple things, not major things, $1 million projects or what. I want to do simple things that I could deliver in the next 3 years while I'm in the council if I'm elected. So these are the things: on-demand transportation, reinvigorate the Pitoni Granada Village Expressway, and get in touch with the developers on the Stabbing Valley and Linkshire Farm for the housing projects. A number of other things that I think I can deliver. With that note, I want to thank all of you for taking your Saturday and being here to listen to the candidates, what they have to say. On 16th, the election starts. Please vote for Raveen, and vote 1 for Raveen. And I will deliver what I promised to all of you. Thank you. Narera, tina koto, tina koto.
Thank you, Raveen. I'll now ask Rachel Keane to come up and make her presentation.
Sorry, could you just announce who's speaking more clearly?
Oh, okay. I'll now call upon Rachel Key to make her presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Tina koto katoa. Greetings to everyone. My name is Rachel Key. I know some people may pronounce Rachel Key. That's also fine, but QI is my surname, so it's Rachel Key. I'm one of the independent candidates standing for the Northern Ward at this local election. I'm very honored to be able to working with many of you already. I have met many of you. I'm one of the committee members at Tidham Park Community Association Board. Also President of Multicultural Council of Wellington. In the meantime, I have business, arts, governance experiences in across public sector, private, not-for-profit, and community organizations. What I'm standing here is not how good I am, it's actually how good I am listening to people and working with people. I think that is missing at some points, that we haven't got good enough opportunities for people to have a say and listen to the majority of the Wellingtonians what you like the Wellington to be. So my priorities for the Northern Ward will be infrastructure, which I think very important for many of us to make sure anything that above and below the ground is fixed as infrastructure as our priority. When you fix our pipes, fix the slips, and also make sure the parks, the sports areas, and everything else, infrastructure will be my priorities one. In the meantime, I want to see a safe home and neighborhood. to make sure people are feeling safe, comfortable, well-connected communities. So we can work with New Zealand Police, other social organizations, and also support the neighborhood supporting groups to make sure we get that support. In the meantime, housing, as you know, we pay so much for the in-rates, but what people expect is actually some return. What's the improvement for the Northern Ward? So I believe that City Council cannot be the provider of the housing all the time. We need to be a better facilitator, that working with the central government and other agencies to make sure people have accessible, affordable housing, not just like private house, but also social housing as well. In the meantime, public transport, that's a big part. Many people have told me we want, and I believe so, as affordable, accessible, and also reliable bus services. So we will, if I'm elected, I'll work with the regional council and also other organizations to make sure people are enjoying a better public transport service. We need to protect our environment, also in the meantime to make sure we balance economic development. So we back the small business and also the communities. So I'm approachable, I'm committed, and I'm energetic. I'm out and about all the time. If I'm elected, I promise I'll be with you as much as I can, as often as I can. So you have a councillor who works with you all the way through. Thank you very much. Vote for one for Rachel G. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel. I now ask Jenny Condie to come up and make her presentation.
Kia ora koutou, thank you Warren. Ngā mihi nui to all of you, and ngā mihi nui to Taranaki Whānui and Ngāti Tō Rangatira, who are the mana whenua of this place in Wellington. I want to start by telling you about some of the things I'm proud of, having been your councillor and work that I've done this term. The thing I'm most proud of is that I was on the mayoral task force for Three Waters and spent a lot of time coming to grips with what had gone wrong with our water infrastructure and what we would need to do to fix it. It turned out that a lot of the issues came back to issues around depreciation and spending and some confusion about we were collecting depreciation funding, but we weren't necessarily keeping up with renewals spending. And that was an issue that was happening there. We are now spending as fast as Wellington Water can work. The council were unanimous in spending on fixing your pipes. There's nobody on the council who does not want to fix the pipes. And the issue we're really facing now is about how do we build construction capacity in Wellington so that we can gear up to deliver as much of this infrastructure work as we need to. Issues around specialised machinery, skilled labour, and international supply chains are all things that we're working really hard to manage. And that means that as council we have to be able to do really good work around things like project management and asset management. And I was the Deputy Chair of the Audit and Risk Subcommittee, where we do a lot of work around making sure that that part of council, the business part of council of getting things done, is working really effectively. It's a similar issue that we're facing. We've had all of these slips we've just experienced, and we have a similar issue there. We spend about $5 million every year on building new retaining walls around the city to secure these slopes. And that's as much as we can spend at the moment. The construction industry in Wellington cannot deliver more than that. So again, it's an area where we really are trying to work hard to encourage these contractors to invest in Wellington, bring more people and more machinery here. And to do that, we have to persuade them that we're going to have a long-term, steady pipeline of work for them to come in, and that they can trust us as council, as a partner to work with. Now, we know obviously rates have been uncomfortably high in the 3 years that I've been in council, and nobody has any questions about that. One of the main issues there has been around this construction sector price increases. So particularly since COVID, for example, steel has at times been twice as expensive as it was before COVID, and lots of other things have been much more expensive, like concrete, as well as just getting engineering staff. And that's one of the main things that's putting pressure on our rates. And that's a challenge because we know that you all want us to invest in infrastructure and do those things, but we have to try and balance this against the cost increases we're seeing and the capacity that we've got in the market. one of the things we have been doing to try and make sure that your rates do not go up too quickly is looking at savings internally and better processes that we can make. Can we be more efficient internally? Doing the same services better, and that has been really successful. Staff have saved $17 million in the last 2 years, and their goal for this year is another $15 million. Across 3 years, that works out to 10% rates increases that we have avoided passing on to you. We are also investing in other things that help us control costs. We have invested in a project of ground penetrating radar so that we know exactly where all the pipes and cables are under our roads, which can save a lot of time and money in projects. So when we replaced the stormwater drain down on the quays and we were able to close the road just for 3 days, that was because we had this ground penetrating radar, and it avoided things like time and cost blowouts, which means that we do save you money on those projects as well. So these are the kinds of things that we're trying to do to make sure that we are as careful with your rates money as we can be, while still trying to get on top of these infrastructure issues. In the last little bit, I just want to talk about density in Johnsonville, that we are going to see a lot more growth in Johnsonville. I have been meeting with Stride several times. They have some really exciting new plans for their area of Johnsonville Mall. I wish we could make them public. You'll enjoy them once we can. And the amenities that will bring to Johnsonville. So that's me. Thank you very much. Kia ora. Please vote on Condie.
Thank you, Jenny, and I'll now ask John Apanowicz to make his presentation.
Thank you very much, and thank you to JCA for again hosting this event. It's always good to be in Johnsonville. I live locally in the Ahari Valley. My parents moved here in 1972, so I've been around a long time. I drew number 8, 8 of hearts. What's the heart of Wellington like at the moment? Not good. I don't think so. I want to bring in a bit of vibrancy to the council. I want to bring in both the balance between a business person who knows how to work things and make things work, and also a heart of a Wellingtonian. I'm a proud Wellingtonian, but am I proud of Wellington at the moment? I'm not 100% sure. So as I said, my parents moved here in 1972, Neville Street. It was beginning at the base of the street, continued up, works all the way through to Ahari Valley. I drive through there every day now. I went to West Park School, went to Raroa, went to Victoria University, studied there, have 2 degrees. I'm a chartered accountant, I'm a chartered secretary, and I wear my Rotary badge proud, like my fellow Rotarians here and other Rotarians who are in the room as well. Our community needs a local champion with a strong voice. Someone that sits at the same gridlocked traffic as you do in your family. Fortunately, I go into work at 7 o'clock, so there's not much traffic at that time. I catch the buses. I like it. The number one problem is, half the time it doesn't turn up. It's a big issue. And this is meant to be the arterial route for Wellington, from Johnsonville all the way through to Island Bay. I like to fund community projects with Johnsonville Rotarians. I run the local Christmas market, so note that for December. I also run a lot of other activities as well, so I'm very involved in the current community. I think there's a number of issues that we have to address within council, and I'll just touch briefly on my experience in the last 3 years. So I'm one of returning candidates. I know there's a couple in the crowd who I saw come in, and I know there's a couple here as well. So I ended up being elected to chair the Ahari Community Board. So I've done that for 3 years. So unlike the council, the chair is actually appointed by the community board. So in those 3 years with the Ahari Community Board, we've worked together. Bit of a surprise, really. You know, that's what you would expect from council. That is what you expect from your elected representatives. I don't think we've seen that. But if you want to see how it works, come out to either Ahari or Mackerel when we have our meetings. They're all publicly available. You can turn up and see how they run. Because the one thing that we do is that we actually get along. We respect each other's views. We actually talk to each other. And if we disagree, that's fine, because we're comfortable to sit around and have a drink with each other and just talk things through. So if you want to talk issues, I think the first one that people come to me on is rates. Better value for rates. A plan for growth. What's the issue there? Well, I'm a chartered accountant. I work in business as a CFO, so I work through the numbers, and I want to see what's going on in there, because I don't think we're getting the value for money that we are all paying. And constantly people are telling me it's too expensive. Transport, again, touch on that. The issues we have getting in and out of town should not occur. Additionally, on the housing front, the housing growth should be, is and will be in the northern suburbs. There's some plans in the central city, but they need to be thought through and focused. But I really want to see a strong and safe community out here. I think Johnsonville has some major issues with how we're interacting, and I think Stride has a lot to answer for in that situation. And finally, I like clean air, clean water, and clean Wellington, just like we have in Ohara Valley. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John, and I call upon Ben McNulty to come up and make his presentation.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Ben McNulty, I'm your Labour candidate, and tonight I'm asking for your first preference vote. I'm going to start with a little tale. A decade ago, my grandma went into care at Cashmere Home in Houston Road. Wasn't a particularly easy time. Take a fierce Hungarian woman that survived Nazis and then communists and put her in that environment might be a little challenging. But there were things that helped. And the things that helped were the staff, who were genuine and compassionate, and the visits from family. The days where we could see her were always the brightest. In May this year, 23 residents from that home were forced to relocate out of Wellington City because Cashmere could not find enough staff. That's 23 lives upended. I start here because it's a microcosm, one amongst the many we're going to discuss tonight, of how Wellington has been trending in the wrong direction for a considerable period of time now. When you have a city with the highest rents in the country, when the median house price is 9 times the median income, there are real-world consequences for every single Wellingtonian. And at its core, that's why I'm standing in front of you tonight. So, a bit on me. I grew up in Ngaio, Raro Intermediate, Onslow College. Mum used to take me to Zampelli's in the mall when I was 3 years old. I was there on Father's Day. I don't think it's changed much since. And my wife Carly and I, we bought our first house here in Johnsonville about 3 years ago. And I've been a dad for almost 2 years now, and that's why I'm really passionate about this city. I loved growing up in Wellington, and I really want to make sure Jack has those same experiences. So I firmly believe Wellington's best days are ahead of us, and in the Takapū Northern Ward in particular, that is extra the case. So we are a growth corridor, it's been touched on tonight, that brings considerable challenges around infrastructure and investment, but it brings so much opportunity as well. In the last few years, we've seen some amazing green shoots in this area. We've seen businesses like Common Ground, Schechter's Deli, Welly Collective, or Wilson's Barbecue set up shop, look at the changing demographics and go, actually, yeah, the North's a pretty good place to do business. So my vision for Wellington, take these green shoots and grow the garden, so to speak. So how do you do that? Number one, we enable smart housing density in our core centres, and we have fantastic public transport links. Number two, we invest in council staff, so we don't close pools for months at a time, and it doesn't take 12 months to get a resource consent. We do it by building world-class council facilities like Waitohi or Pukahuia. We do it by making sure that our city is accessible to anyone regardless of age or ability. And I've had conversations with people in this room who've said as they get older, they feel like Wellington is excluding them. That's not good enough. But most importantly, we do it with having a 10, 20, 50-year lens over every single decision we make at council. That's not only the socially responsible thing, it's the fiscally prudent thing to do, so we avoid another catastrophe like we have with the water infrastructure today. So, a bit more on me. I've worked in financial services now for over a decade. I've headed up insurance programs covering over $1 billion in assets, and I currently work in the funds management space. Real-world, practical experience that will let me hit the ground running at council. So I'll finish up with this. This is a community that I know intimately. I'm passionate about it, and I love it. If you elect me as your councillor, I will be a fierce and proud voice for you at the council table. Kia ora.
Thank you very much, Ben. And I'd also like to thank all the candidates for giving their presentations to the timetable that we requested of you. We'll now take a 5-minute break and we'll reconvene then to begin the question and answer session.
If people do have questions that they have thought of during the presentations, please put your hand up and we'll come around and give you a
Raffle
raffle
ticket.
ticket.
Before we start the second half, I think it's appropriate that we all just take a minute's silence to remember the Queen. So I'd ask that that be done now, please. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Redirect turning off the phones.
Oh, redirect?
Just everyone turn off their phones.
Yes, well, that's what I did. Yes, I did ask everyone to do that at the start of the meeting. Please do that. Turn off your phone. Sorry, what are you? Masks. Oh. Yes, I think we'll just carry on. I'm sorry.
Masks are required.
Yep. I understand that there are other candidates from other wards as well as McNulty candidates in the room. Would you like to stand up and introduce yourself?
Ray Chung, for Mayor and also in non-Sullivan.
Matthew Rewishi, I'm running in the new Māori ward, Te Whanganui Akara. I'm also born and raised in the Johnsonville area, schooled at Randle, as in the uni and everything as well. So,
Is there anyone else? No. Thank you. So for this session, this question and answer session, the questions are going to be chosen at random by me out of this hat, and that's the raffle tickets that everybody has been given. And questions will come from the audience and also from YouTube. I just want to go over some of the rules for this question and answer session. The first is that when I call your raffle ticket number, would you just wait for the microphone to be delivered to you and then ask the question. Be very clear about the issue that you want to raise and the answer you are seeking. Also make it clear whether the question is for one or more candidates. So if it's for all of the candidates, tell us that. If it's for some of the candidates, please tell us that too. I ask both the questioners and the candidates to make certain, or try their very best to be as succinct as possible with their questions and answers so that we can get through as many questions and answers during the session. And the final thing I'd ask is that this be a respectful process both ways. So, without further ado, I'll call the first ticket number. That number is 47.
Hi, thank you for coming this evening. My question is, the cycle plan includes, also a general question, sorry. The cycle plan includes cycleways along Johnsonville Road, around the Triangle, and up Newlands Road and Stewart Drive. Do you support this?
That's Maureen. Kia ora. I do support that. I think it's really important that we provide that opportunity for people to cycle and cycle safely. That said, I think it's also really important for us to know that the Let's Get Wellington Moving project is coming to the Johnsonville Triangle, and they've started their business case on that. And so that's actually looking at bus lanes and priority bus lanes around this area. It seems like that's going to be, that actually the bus lanes and the subways will come at the same time, and that'll be a significant thing for us to look at all together.
Thank you. So I do not support that. I don't think the cycle plan, which is the one-size-fits-all plan for the whole city, actually works. I think that each suburb is different, and I think the city is obliged to come and work with each community about what it wants for its transport needs, and in particular up here in North, the access that's needed by car and by bus is the priority. And so I would go and relook at that plan, and in particular I would oppose the blanket traffic resolution that's given the City Council has given itself the right just to go and remove the parks without even talking to you. So I think that's just wrong and it's undemocratic.
Well said. I actually can split the plan as well. It's not timing, and I think you answered it very well. So nothing else here.
I agree with what Tony has said. I don't agree with this. It's not high priority for now. I think we've got more priorities for infrastructure and other things. So I would not support this.
I do not support the cycle lane from Johnsonville to Newlands due to the congestion of traffic that we have in Johnsonville. It's a busy suburb at the moment. How do we bring in the cyclists and give priorities there? I'm not against any cyclists here, please don't get me wrong, but I'm looking at the safety perspective. So let's be cautious on what we are doing here, because safety is primary focus. So look at the suburb Johnsonville, how busy it is on the peak time, at the peak time. So definitely a no from myself. Thank you.
Yep, in general, I'd like to just check around mobility, parking, and making sure there's loading access to the collective hub, because that's been raised to me. But by and large, people don't deserve to be injured or die for the public transport choices or their own transit choices that they make. Get it?
I would also note the loss of taxis along the main road.
I will not support for unsafe cycle lane, and we have seen that my priority will be different. We have to invest more money currently on infrastructure and all. Thank you.
In general, yes, absolutely, cycleways are really important, and important I think to see as a part of a network. One size fits all across the city is a little bit of a misdirection, I think, because yes, it does need to be adapted carefully to each local area. That part of the process is yet to come. The council has made big level decisions, and the rest of the process is yet to come, which is why you need good leadership on there to make sure that those kind of things happen. Obviously, I 100% agree with Ben, is that we need a range of public transport options and a range of ways of getting around, including cycling, so that it takes pressure off the roads as well, to ease congestion. Thank you.
Ticket number 58. Wait for the microphone. Put your hand up.
Yes, this is a question for everybody. The President Council denied our ward a vote at the table by voting not to replace retiring Malcolm steroid and pocketing $7,500 each. If you were on council, how would you vote and why? And if not, what would you have done if you had been on council?
Can you repeat the question?
Okay. I've been asked for you to repeat the question by Raveen here.
Sorry, the question was, the President Council denied our ward a vote at the table by voting not to replace retiring Councillor Malcolm Sparrow
and pocketing $7,500 each. If you were on the council, how would you vote and why? If not, what would you have done in this situation?
You start again. We're
I'll
starting
start with that because I was the person that they chose not to replace Malcolm Sparrow with. So I was a bit disappointed with that because I felt that the people of the northern suburbs were hard to buy, to be honest, because I was willing to stand up and actually take that on. Unfortunately, certain councils voted against that, and that was purely political. There was no reason for me not to take that spot. So I would have actually voted for myself.
I come from a rather interesting perspective on this one. We had a resignation also from the Tawa Community Board at the same time, and we faced the same process. Do we appoint or not? It's actually far more usual around the country if you're not within a by-election period, if you're within the 1 year leading up to an election where an appointment process happens, it's far more usual not to appoint someone. So that is not an unusual decision around the country. It does actually impact your ward, I understand that, and that's always a very serious thing when something happens. How I would have voted, and I comment on the money side of it, I would have been very uncomfortable making that vote knowing that I was going to get more money out of it, but you would have had no choice as a councillor about the money side of it. You can't choose to not take it. It's from a pool. It's just the way it happens. But I've had a lot of flack from the decision that we've made as a community board for actually appointing somebody. So it's one of those can't-win situations, unfortunately. It's just a really difficult issue when someone resigns. There's no easy answer on that one.
But that wasn't a live on candidate. That was someone laid down the list.
Can we just continue answering the questions, please?
Yeah, Northern Suburb already lost one person in Malcolm Sparrow, and we lost one representation. And as far as money is concerned, I would have donated the money to some charity which is working in Northern Suburb. Thank you.
Hey John, I like you mate, but you did twist it a touch there. Peter Gilbert, who was the Labour representative, came forth and he would have been first in line and he chose not to take that up. So I'm going to just make an assumption that, there's going to be some people in this room that don't particularly like Labour. That's absolutely fine. You would have had 3 progressive councillors though, 3 left-leaning progressive councillors, Malcolm Sparrow being a more conservative bent. So it's a hard one to answer. I probably would have voted to do it just purely on the basis that we were so close to a fresh election, but I feel almost conflicted to answer it. Peter was a good representative, he would have been a good councillor. If he'd put his hand up, no, he would have been through, and then John came from it, so just to caveat that.
I want to be very honest to all of you. Definitely, it's a no to me. And the reason, when you know your term is almost finishing, you could have finished that term and then move on. It is quite irresponsible to just leave halfway through. And this is what I want to say to all of you here. Please nominate, cast your votes to the right candidates who can roll up his sleeve and work for the people. To me, it's all about people, people, and people. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. I actually have been working with the City Council very closely, so I know many of the councillors very well, especially Malcolm and other councillors all in the Northern Ward. So I think for me, if I was there, I would have voted no, and I really want Peter to come back to the table, who has been working with for our communities very hard. The other thing for the salary, if I was there, I would suggest that we, donate that money to a charity, and especially beneficial to the Northern Ward.
It's an interesting question. I think in this circumstance, because John only got 200 votes less than Peter, I think he was really in the same category. If it was willing to be offered to Peter, it should have been offered to John. In the last year, this council's made some huge decisions around the district plan, around major investments, and in that, we've only had 2 votes when our population, in fact our population deserves more than 3 because we're the largest ward. And so I think we've been shortchanged. I'd also note that I understand that the Tawa Community Board, someone resigned there and someone was appointed there. So there's a little bit of an inconsistency about what happens around this place at times. So yeah, interesting point. But there is a limit below which I think you can't keep going down to the next and next. But John, I thought was close enough, and he should have been offered.
And the salary, Tony?
Oh, well, the salary is, I mean, Robyn's correct. Salary is fixed. It's a fixed pool and it's beyond the control of councillors. I don't think that councillors, and I genuinely say that even the councillors who voted not to do it, that they did it for the money. I really don't think that's true. I think they did it because of some more principle side of things. I don't necessarily agree with the principles, but I don't think it's so much about the money.
Yeah, so on the whole, I think the council, I think that the appropriate decision. Malcolm's Barrett could have chosen to have resigned 3 days earlier in a false by-election if he wished to. So by resigning 1 year from the election, he forced council to make a decision, the rest of council to make a decision when he could have had an influence on that.
The question wasn't about reasons, it was
what he could have impacted how the result was. As for the remuneration, as you mentioned, unfortunately, councillors don't necessarily get much back. They cannot refuse it, is effectively what was communicated to them. They had to figure out what to do. So the complaint there should be laid with central government to say, in these situations, can councils simply return that fund or assign those funds elsewhere? I think on the whole, the council made the appropriate decisions, and also on the people like to complain about fiscal responsibility. Had they chosen to run an by-election, that would cost a lot of money as well. So, no matter the decision, it would be unfortunate and uncomfortable for many people to decide on that.
Thank you for the question. I know that it's an issue that has really upset some people in the Northern Ward, and it's probably one of the more controversial things that we've done this term. I just want to say thank you to Tony. I appreciate it. I know you disagree with the decision we made, but I appreciate you saying that you don't think it had anything to do with the money. It certainly didn't.
I think it was a major
I can say that I donated all of the money to a charity, and I know that Councillor Gilday also donated all that additional money to a charity. So like councillors that as well, I don't know exactly across the rest of the city, but I know the two of us did. I think it was a really difficult situation to be in. I would have supported Peter Gilbert coming back to the table because he was an experienced councillor and he knew kind of the ropes, he knew the job. And that was one of my biggest concerns, is having come in as a councillor at the start of the term, you get a full induction program, all kinds of training and support, and you're going through it with a whole bunch of other new people at the same time. I was really concerned about bringing somebody into the council who wasn't going to get that kind of support and training, and basically was coming into the middle of some really difficult decisions, and let's be honest, a relatively difficult group of people. So that was the reason I definitely would have voted for Peter if he put his hand up, and the reason that I didn't support John. I would say as well that it was actually a challenging time. There was kind of conversations happening over the week. Is Peter going to stand? Would you support Peter? Yes, I support Peter. I think Peter's going to do it. And then Peter said, no, I don't want to do it. And actually, to be frank, I didn't know that John wanted to put his hand in the ring until I showed it at the meeting where I had to make a decision. And sometimes that happens at council, where you get put in a really difficult situation and you kind of have to make a decision on the fly. So, I didn't know until we walked into the room and somebody said, hey, but what about John Apanowicz? And like I say, what I was really thinking, what I had on my mind at the time is what a challenging role it is to come into, and that, I really didn't think it was going to be fair on somebody to come into that without the support they would have enough from the production. So that's what was on my mind.
And you gave the money away.
And I gave the money away, yes. To my local Tawa school, they're going to use it to help them build a bicycle park track, which will be a great facility for the community to use as well.
Okay. Ticket number 44. Microphone, hand up.
Thanks very much to the candidates for their thoughtful answers. We are hoping to get through as many questions tonight as possible, so if we could keep the answers as succinct as possible, that would be great. Thank you.
My name is Gregory Kent, and I'd like to know the views of the candidates on the loss of local control of the three core public services of drinking water, wastewater and drainage to an unelected body.
Just before the candidates answer this question, which is a big question, please keep your answers succinct.
So I would say look at the past 20, 30 years of elected representation and the result of that. It doesn't mean simply having an elected group does not mean it's something going to be better. It's running out of battery. So I think I think it is the right choice, and at the same time, it doesn't remove any oversight from local bodies or local officials. But I think that overall, it is the right step to make. It is painful. I think it is the right step to move.
Thank you. Yes, I do support it. It's consistent with all the recommendations of the mayoral task force, which I was a member of, and will solve a lot of the issues that got us into this situation in the first place, which is one of the main reasons I support it. I think we do need to continue to work with the model about how we can encourage local voice, and in particular, actually not elected local voice, but local community, direct community voice from people like Friends of Zero Stream and groups like that, so that they have input into that process. There is a mechanism for that. I think we need to work with the central government to make sure that that works well.
Yes. First of all, I think the key point is this is not a decision the council has any say over whatsoever, and no councillor does. This is a decision the government is doing to councils. So what we think matters very little. You might think that's undemocratic, and I would probably agree with you, but that's the situation. I think there's another element though, that given it's going to happen, it's essential, I believe it's essential the City Council works really closely with the new agency to make sure that the program is not lost, and we make sure we get our priority stuff sorted, whatever way it's done. And lastly, I would just have to note that I've not seen many big problems solved by a big government agency as being the solution. Doesn't seem to be working that well, so I'm concerned.
Thanks for your question. I would say from the front that I'm against free waters. I think it's undemocratic. It has the potential to be a bureaucratic time. And if design and water can't work, I don't see how something else can work.
Thank you for the question. So my answer would be it's a little bit too rushed. Current through water at its current format. It's a little bit too rushed, and there are a lot of pushbacks. So I think we need to better kind of review. I do believe that City Council need to find a better way to deal with our free waters, which is very important to us. This current format, I'm not fully supporting this current format, because I think there's a lot of pushbacks. In the meantime, there's lack of accountability. So I think that's need to be reviewed. Thank you.
As for me, I'm not in favour yet for the three waters because there's a lot of information required to the public. A lot of awareness should be created to the public on the pros and cons of the three water system. And even the council report book says, if you go through this report book, it's got 5 key challenges why three waters is not favouring at the moment. So it's a no for now, but let's explore this further. Thank you.
Kia ora. Yep, support the Three Waters reforms because right now it's a choice between the status quo or doing something different, and the status quo is unsustainable. A few weeks ago I had a leaking sewage pipe, sewage gas, down the bottom of my driveway every day, taking my son down there, forcing him to smell that. That's not a sustainable option. That's not a sustainable option for us to be the capital city with sewage running down our CBDs or fountains popping up in Ari Valley. If the National Party want to put forward a better policy for Wellington, awesome. But at the moment, this Three Waters is the best we're going to get.
Yeah, the Three Waters, that's our asset, and it has already been legislated. So central government has pushed its agenda. Out of 67 councils, 60 opposed it, but they have already said no, we are going to push for it. And what I am opposed to it is very undemocratic, and it is creating 4 mega entities with huge bureaucracy expense. And if you talk about Wellington infrastructure, yes, that is our asset, but it needs lots of repairs and all that. I have spoken to one of the top leaders of National Party as well regarding their views on Three Waters, and they said they have assured me that there will be a partnership between the local government and central government. So let's see how it goes. Thank you.
In brief, general support for Three Waters, simply we actually have to get it fixed. Nothing much else on the table at the moment in terms of alternatives. Would definitely advocate strongly for more local voice, though that's definitely a problem with it.
Thank you everyone for being succinct. Question number 48, put your hand up.
Hi. I have a question around public transport infrastructure, and would you support a train station at Glenside given the increasing population in that?
Is your question directed to all the candidates?
Yes.
Train station at Glenside, that's an interesting one. That brings with it some interesting consequences with density. Just, I'm not sure how many Glenside residents would appreciate that, but whether it needs to be a train station or whether it needs to be some other, perhaps more innovative form of public transport, it would need to be looked at carefully. I've been very closely involved with the on-demand transport trial, advocating for that for Tawa. I wouldn't make assumptions that that's going to work everywhere, but new ideas need to be looked at, so, and it's different for every area. So I'd need to look into that more.
Yeah, Takapū station is the closest, and if you want to have a station at Glenside, I don't know, currently it is not, will not be suitable, and because I was thinking we had visited Glenside and looking at the cycleways and had spoken to the resident, and their current concern is the development of the Stubbing Valley and all the silt that is going into the Porirua Harbour. So I have to look into it, how the population grows, and then only we can make a decision.
Okay, great question. I just have to make the caveat that none of the 9 of us up here had any power to do anything about that, because public transit is the purview of Greater Wellington Regional Council, not Wellington City Council. So, I could say in concept the idea sounds pretty solid. We've got 2,600 homes going up in the hills, on the Granada Hills, in the next decade's being planned for. So there is going to be a need for public transport links for them. I would say GWRC are already though, so you might know that Woodridge to Granada Village is under construction, a link road, and then that will come into Granada North over time as well. So we'll have actually a bus service that GWRC have envisioned that will run from Johnsonville Station to Takapū Station through that area. So that may alleviate the need to do it, but in concept it sounds like something that could be solid, but like Robyn, we just have to see details.
Great question. I'm a Metlink staff. I work for Transdev, and to my knowledge, we don't envisage that at the moment. But what Ben has said through the Greater Wellington region, we would work very closely to work on-demand transportation that will provide to the nearest station. So that is one thing that's going to happen. Very soon it's going to happen. So we are working. If I'm elected, definitely that's one of my primary focus, to facilitate the 10 minutes transportation to the nearest station. That is one area that I'll work on. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Infrastructure definitely #1 priorities for me. So I've been talking to the Greenside Community Association, also I'm part of the Children Park Community Association. I understood that many of the people have told me from Greenside and Children Park they wanted to have a train station. So it definitely reflects people's needs. But in the meantime, I understood it's not easy thing, and it's very complicated, and including some technical issues and also of the landscape. We've got Middleton Road and street, etc. So that's part of the thing that we need to work with regional council. In the meantime, we need to put a better bus service and also affordable access for reliable bus service in front, and then we can look into other options, including the train station. So I'll definitely look into this. Thank you.
In the last election, Paul Ingrid, who's an inside resident, actually raised this issue with me and showed some quite detailed analysis and plans around that, and it was quite impressive actually. And so I'm in favour of it. I thought it was a great idea. I mean, I do take Ben's point as that it's a regional council scenario, so as a city council, it's not something we do. But of course, as city councils, we do have to interact with the regional council, so there's something that we provide to. I also think it's a great way to access into Sullivan Park as well, and another way by just another bus service, which usually makes its way through the council.
Yes, interesting question. Ben is right. It's a regional council issue, and if they don't support it, there's nothing the city can do. This disconnect between public transport and everything else between the regional council and ourselves is a big problem. But the fundamental thing for lower density areas like Glenside, and even with those number of houses, it's still lower density, is to have a really good, really reliable bus service, and where possible, where needed, bus lanes to keep the buses on time, even if there's traffic congestion. I prefer to focus our resources, because the city has much more influence on that, to build that in. But it's an interesting idea, so thank you for it.
So sort of largely what Sullivan has said, I also point out that a station inside will also create some difficulties around building really high frequency headways on the railway system on that capital line, especially when mixing with the existing freight services and such. So it's not as simple as just walking down the station and hanging on the front out and there we go, we're fixed. What I would think that council can do, actually is not even bus stop, which is a good idea, but much more actively and even be done sooner is dedicated cycle infrastructure out to say Takapū Road Station or the Knoxville Station, and working with the regional council to install good quality secure bike storage. This is something that can be rolled out quick. It doesn't need any bus service, it doesn't need millions of dollars spending buses, staff, things like that. Put in bike lanes and then you can just go whenever they don't have to go to the bus around or bus go, and it's something that can be done in the interim whilst everything else is also
analysis around all kinds of improvements for the trains around the city. And it's not a priority at the moment because it's actually more complex than it looks to put a station in there. But it is amazing when you get on, at Takapū station, you just go straight into that kind of long blizzard in the city. So I think long term, that's something that I expect that they will look at. And then the issue is, of course, how we get people from Church Park down to a station like that. And that will be, we've talked about on-time transport, it will be things like people might be able to cycle, people whiz down the hill to the station, those sorts of things are going to be an important part of that. And I always say, Greater Wellington run the buses, but the buses run on city council streets. And that's where we have the ability to contribute to public transport, is with bus lanes and improving bus boxes and all that kind of stuff.
Just one other thing too, I do know Newlands wants an underground station.
Yes.
So we're not talking about the Greenside one more.
Thank you, everyone. Question number, ticket number 56. Hand up, please. No? Number 55. Hand up, please. No, great.
Still not going?
There you go.
There it is. There are 14, you would have 14 colleagues on council if you're elected. So I was just wondering, how would you handle, for example, relationships?
We're out. Relationships with people who have views that are deeply opposed to you, but you're still going to work with them. That was a question for anyone who's has not who like answer.
On we go. And it's almost a day job. So working in IT software projects, you end up working with large groups of people with very different opinions on what's important, how things get done, and working with people in a team with trying to build an aim, and always keeping that in mind and trying to make sure everyone understands why decisions are being made and where this is being taken. So really it boils down to a lot of conversation and always trying to keep that conversation open and going.
Next total will actually be 17 because we're going to have two Māori representatives and we'll have Whanganui Atara Māori will have that there as well. So I think my approach to it has just always been over the 3 years, don't surprise people. That's number one. And be polite and just they're your colleagues. Be polite with people, don't surprise people, tell people what you're working on, and share your views lightly. And that's really the best that you can do. I think the reality is you can only control your own behaviour, and you have to just find a way to work through it and make sure that you're holding yourself up. Sorry, Jane, I just want to say. Looks like the last two words are exactly. There we go. Just that you're holding yourself up to your own values and you're constantly kind of checking yourself out, have I lived up to my own values in this situation? And at the end of the day, being willing to just let it go, and yesterday's done, and you're on to the next week, the next decision, and you do it.
Yes, I think it's a very important question because there has been a selection, at least looking at some of the YouTube users around it. I mean, part of the answer is to respect them always because they've got a mandate to be there and they do represent a view that's valid in our city. So I think we start with that. He is right, you need to be polite, professional. And the other thing which I think is important is to because they may be philosophically opposed in some broad principles, but in solving particular issues, often you'll find that there's some common ground, or and so you've got to work with that. So that also means having a relationship. So I mean that's just essential. I certainly, from the Northern Ward side of things, irrespective of who gets elected out of these 10, I would expect to have a weekly meeting with everybody so that we can make sure the Northern Ward's got a common voice as much as possible that we can agree on, and we're sharing our communications with our various parts of the subject. So yes, you've got to work with it.
I agree. I think we need to be professional and in a way empathetic to the views of other people as well. I mean, from a personal standpoint, I work on a lot of boards, so I interact with a lot of different people that always manage to achieve common ground. And the primary example, of course, I've mentioned before is my chairman for our area community board. We have 7 individuals, but we do a long role. We don't have the same point of view, but that's just how it works.
Thank you for the question. I'm always a team player. I work with a team together, so as working with the local communities. So I have the experience across public sector, private and not-for-profit community groups. So I do have the ability to work with people, different cultural background, different personalities. So what I think is important is the communication with a respected attitude. So if we respect each other and have a common ground and share values, we can fix the issue. And what's on top of everything is I think about what we represent as a local council and local community. So I think that's something I agree with what others have said, that regular communication and with respect attitude. In the meantime, working as a group for the majority of the Wellingtonians vote.
Thank you to the person who has asked this wonderful question, because this is the current situation we are facing in the council, that the decisions can't be made within the 15 people who sits at the governance board. So I have represented a number of council and federation in this country, and I thank God and the universe for that knowledge and skills that I've gained. And again, I want to say, I bring my compassion, honesty and transparency as the main values to the table to seek an agreement and work as a team. But having said that, I want to make sure that my people in northern wards, their voices are heard at the governance table. That's my primary focus. And how I wish to do it? I want to work with every community boards here, representing them, sitting with them, listening and executing petitions, as that petition will be signed by many of us as from different community boards, put it on the table, and the voices should be heard. So that is one area that I'm looking at to work aggressively, because when I'm elected, I'm going to hit the ground with my compelling desire to win for people of Northern Ward. Thank you.
Hey, great question. The work should have already begun is the first answer to that, and I want to call it a correspondence basis with everyone on that table. Unfortunately, Rachel never responded to my text about a coffee, but John and Tony we've talked about multiple times. But no, the work should have already begun is my first answer. You probably just didn't get it, but it's okay.
I think that's...
But anyway, so the work, yeah, that's the main thing, right? Before we're even in there, we should have a working relationship standing in front of you as candidates. There are going to be disagreements where values and things come through, but the reason why it was so important for me to reach out to so many of the people here was that there could be things that I feel really passionately about where the numbers aren't there. So I need to be able to make the best case possible for why I think something's important. And you can't do that when someone's a stranger. So friends before we even get in, or acquaintances perhaps, is the best way to frame it.
Yeah, thank you. Great question. There will be lots of disagreement, but we have to arrive at a common ground. And I think I will be your voice in the council. So I'll come back to you guys, and I will, yeah, even if it is a petition or whatever, you all say if everybody agrees, I'll put that point in the council and try to work as a team, because I'm a team player. I have managed many organizations, and I have achieved a very good outcome. So yes, I'm a team player, and I work in the council. Thank you.
As I said before, respect, it's all about relationship building, even if you disagree. I, as chair, highly value differing opinions around the table because they, in my mind, sharpen the decision-making process, so it's about respect for the differing opinions as much as the ones who support you. I would also throw out a strong encouragement to whoever else gets elected, whoever gets elected with the Northern Ward. I've found having professional leadership development to be beyond value in terms of personal accountability to your own values. It's easy to sit up here at the moment and say, I value this, I value respect, or when you get into the cauldron of it and the person opposite you does not respect that, that's another matter entirely. So it's a challenging role. It's very challenging. It's one of the most challenging roles in regard to human relationships I can think of, and that's having been a parent of 4 children. So yeah, I would strongly encourage candidates who become successful to reach out for professional development that will keep going through the term. You'll need it.
That was a great question, and it's actually quite relevant, having looked at the council operating for the last 3 years. And I just want to say, just from my own experience, that at management level, ECNZ, all of the managers and the staff were trained on interactions, on how to interact with each other, and there were 3 key principles. The first was maintain the person's self-esteem when you're talking with them. Secondly, listen with empathy. And third, and I found this quite helpful in getting issues resolved, ask for the other person's help in getting the issue resolved. I just thought I'd add that in because it is quite useful, but I think that's a great question. Thank you. Ticket number 52.
Hey guys, my question just relates to lots of playing sport in Wellington. You guys will be aware there's a lobby group of affordable sports that go to Wellington, and they've asked councillors to commit to, or candidates to commit to a review of sporting fees. Could I just have a show of hands from all candidates who's committed to that, please? Cool. That's a good, nice quick answer.
And we have replied to the emails.
Me too.
Ticket number 50.
Thank you. One will go. Right. Okay. Ray Chum, I have a question. In the for everyone, in the long-term plan, it states that projected rate increases over the next 5 years are only 70%. So what I'd like to know is how you support this, and if not, what would you do about it? What would you take out of the long-term plan?
Oh, sorry.
We start with good. Good question. My position is basically that rates, as it currently stands, is a broken model, and that's obvious with the outcomes that we've had with Three Waters and all kinds of things. So the biggest thing to do is an advocacy work with central government to make sure that local government actually has the funding and structures it needs, which are all going to be up for reform soon, to actually perform properly and without having to have crazy rates increases. The money's got to come from somewhere. It's a question of how it's going to be spread and what's the most appropriate way of doing it, and my belief is that rates has failed that test. Overseas there are other options that could be considered that have worked, for example, GST share, back to local economy, that kind of thing. That needs a lot of looking at, but rates is a broken model. I think we can all agree on that.
Very good question, Ray. Here we are in northern suburb, rates have gone up for almost almost like from 19%, between 19% and 24%. So how I'm looking at is, like I mentioned earlier, I've spoken to central government opposition leaders as well, and we want some partnership between the local government and central government to fix our infrastructure, because we are definitely at this juncture we can't afford more and more rate rise, and we have to reduce other expenses as well. Like say for example, town hall, we started with 85 million and now it has already ballooned to 400 million. That is not acceptable. And lots of other expenses, say for example cycle lane. We are going to spend millions of dollars on cycle lane, but is that our priority? And my answer is no. So we definitely need partnership with the central government, and I'm not in favor of more rate rise.
Thanks, Ray. That's actually a really good question, because our ward has been hit hardest by the rates rises because our property values moved more than anywhere else in the city. It's a model. Robyn almost stole my answer to an extent. The first thing we do have is the power to look at targeted rates. That wasn't physically possible in the council's current computer systems till this year. So what I mean by that, in our Labour platform, we want to introduce a targeted rate on land banking. That means that property developers that hoard their land and release it at the last minute possible, aka Churton Park, actually have to contribute towards the costs of owning that land and broadening the revenue base, or they have to release it. So there's some things we can do to diversify the pool. Fundamentally, it is a central government issue. We have to go back on the model for it. I think it has probably been kicked in the next election, will be the local government review. The good thing is National and Labour usually do that hand in hand, because they know councils actually need a long-term view, so you can't play partisan politics on it. As a council, Wellington City Council will submit what they want to do there. If I'm taking my pie in the sky idea, which Robyn referred to, it's a share of GST revenue generated locally. So at the moment we've got rates and we've got debt, and both of those models are unsustainable long term.
Thank you, Ben. I know rates is a pretty big issue for most of us here. To me, it's like what Ben is saying, I said that it's a central government issue. With the current cost crisis and rates have been increasing, that is really pinching our wallets, how do we curb this? And like John has said, all the projects that's undertaken, the cycle lane project is 225 million. And I can go on with the list of the reports that is mentioned at the council report. So the budget is not below that is being targeted, but it's going above and above. And rates is pinching our pockets. I mean, I may be dumb here to say this, but this is what I'm trying to understand the dynamics behind the rates. And I would like to propose a flat rate for the next 3 years. That's it. Don't talk about rates. No increase of rates in the next 3 to 5 years. If Labour government can propose a 50% discount on the transportation for every transportation, why can't? And when Ben says it's a central government issue, why don't they step up and come up with a plan, something like that, freeze it for the next 3-4 years? It's a flat rate of flat rate for the rates, and bring back the events that has been cancelled and get the city lively. We can boost the economy. By that, we can do a lot of things. That's my idea. Thank you.
Can I just ask if you would index rates to CPI under that freeze, or would you hold it at where it is now?
Hold it where it is now.
So it's actually a massive reduction.
Yeah.
Thank you for a very good question. My answer would be, I think many people have told me, saying that they have the concern of that rates increase on the long-term plan. So it's not just individual concern, it's actually many people, majority of the people are concerned about paying that much of the rates and what they get back on the return. So I think that's a thing for concerning many people. For me, I will work with my fellow, if I'm elected, fellow councillors and also local MPs and central government to make sure Wellington gets more support from the central government on the infrastructure and other side, so we don't have to pay that much increase on the rates. And also I support a review on the city priorities, so we can quality spending on the rates. So make sure every single cent of the rates that people are paying accounts. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. I know this is something you're very passionate about, and I know it's one that you've actually looked at quite in depth as well within the council structure as well, and whether there's a degree of wastage within the council that could boost the rates, which is obviously something that is happening. So, what could we take out of the long-term plan? There are a number of items that will be mentioned already. So, my view is you can't do everything and then expect everybody to pay for it. I mean, I got my rates bill and I was pretty horrified actually. One of the other mayoral candidates is also proposing to do a full review of costs, so I think that's something that I would be very much in favour of, to sort of challenge the numbers. I can do that as a chartered accountant quite easily because I do it in my day job.
Yes. So, I'll start by noting there's no such thing as a free lunch, so the less money you spend, the less services you get. My position is that the core services and the core infrastructure spend has to be funded, and we've discovered that this council hasn't been funding the important stuff. You know, they've sort of gone on convention centres and other sorts of things. I know there's some financial reasoning why, but obviously the council took the eye off the ball of doing the basics well and lost track of their own money, which is like the most fundamental job the council should do. I think the starting point is more transparency, and one of the things the council used to do is actually publish some clear summary statistics about who was paying the rates, which wards, which suburbs were contributing, and to a certain extent where it's possible what they were getting back. There seems to be a lot of money. There's a perception, and I don't know if it's true. Ray may know more about this, but there's a perception from the northern suburbs that we contribute more than we receive, because a lot of the stuff that's broken is broken in other parts of the city. So we need to look at that. So core services, core infrastructures, core support for the communities needs to be maintained, and you've got to draw the line, and then you look at the stuff that's left, the money and the projects. We have adopted too, though, some quite grandiose projects that really need to be looked at, and if they've got to be done more slowly, then so be it. Yes, cycle plan is potentially one of them, but the big one is let's get Wellington moving. We're committed to funding 20% of it at $7,000 million. So we really got to look to see whether a tram dialed away is worth that.
Yeah, so I'll just start off with, I think the question's a bit loaded. I don't think anyone supports massively increasing rates. Another point to make is every single councillor is a rates payer as well. The third thing I would say is, if you think the rates are bad, try renting. I'm so happy and lucky I'm no longer a renter. It was awful, and that was on the software developer salary. What the last place I rented was literally giving me heart palpitations. It was injuring me because of how awful the place was. As for rates, yes, it's got the money's got to come from somewhere. If you want to keep rates low, we're going to have to get rid of spending, and really, a lot of that spending is on those things that people view as core infrastructure. One thing that maybe we need to look at is putting limits on how heavy vehicles are, because of how much damage they do to the roads and how much more cost that results in on maintaining the roads. For example, the cost of the damage done by vehicles goes up as a quadratic, I believe. So exponentially. So a vehicle twice as heavy does 4, 6, 8 times as much damage. And roads eat up a huge amount of rates. So do I support the rates rises? Of course not. Do I accept them? If this is what we need to do, then yes. But as mentioned, there are other things that should also be looked at to allow council to actually raise funds in other ways, other than just relying on rates.
Thanks, Ray. I voted for the long-term plan. So my answer is a bit different to everybody else's. The first thing I would just note is that in the long-term plan we were required to plan as if the water reforms were not going to go ahead. So a lot of what's included there is significant investments in water. And we're going to, as the water reforms go ahead, we're going to have to basically crack that open and look at it again very closely to see where we land. I think the other thing that's really important to note is that rates go up just because of the increases that we see in construction costs. So even CPI doesn't actually keep up with the cost of council, because CPI is about groceries and cell phones, and council don't buy a lot of that. We buy pipes and roads and community centres. And so actually the rate of inflation that councils have been seeing is actually more like 5 to 6%, and that's been 5 to 6% for years now, where our rates have often only gone up 3%. That's another reason why we're seeing the pressures that we're seeing now. So I think we have to go back and look really closely at all of those things. I actually have voted against a number of things this term that were very popular projects, but I just felt that we couldn't prioritise them right now. I voted against some additional funding for Circuit Theatre just recently because I thought we should wait till the next budget round. I actually voted against the Condie pool upgrade, which lots of people love, because I don't think it's urgent, and we had 2 or 3 years up our sleeve to wait and see whether that was going to be a priority. I also voted against a couple $100,000 for a park in Mile Bay, for Waikapau Park. And there's a wonderful community group out there that's doing great work. It's a really worthwhile project. But there are some times where I have said, look, I just can't justify this as a priority, even though I think it's worthwhile and it will deliver benefits to the community. But the reality is, when I came in as a first-term councillor, my first budget meeting, I went into thinking, oh, new councillor, we're going to get to do all these cool things. And I walked into the room and the CFO said, right, so the rates rises at 9%. Before we'd done anything, the rates rises at 9% because of all of those pressures, cost pressures. And so that's the situation that I've been in for the last 3 years. Has been how do we get down from 9%, and that year we actually got down to 5%, while still prioritising the really important infrastructure that needed to be spent. We're doing our best. It's a very difficult situation, but yeah, nobody thinks that the rates rises, around 8-9%, and the higher ones we're seeing up here because of the property value changes are reasonable. But also, nobody wants us to cut services. Nobody wants us to say that we're going to close some libraries or that we're going to cut the arts grant budget. The moment you start talking about those sorts of things, there are lots of people in the community who do not want us to do that. So we hear very different things at council. And when we did our first budget, we actually went up with 2 different rate rises and said, which one would you prefer? And a majority of the people who came back said the higher one. So we hear very different things, and we're always trying to balance those priorities.
Thank you, Julie.
Switch.
We'll do the last question now, and that's going to be ticket number 42. Over there. Just wait for the microphone, thank you.
Yeah. So late last year, early this year, we saw a whole bunch of segregation with the vaccine pass system. This closed a lot of access for people to council buildings and such. Do you guys support it?
Yes.
Yes.
Again, that was a decision that was made operationally, and our council staff did a really good job of doing extensive investigations into health and safety. It was really challenging for some members of our community, but at the time I think it was necessary, and I did support it.
So if you're talking about at the time or now?
If they decide to bring it in again, because I'm not going to get another jab. I get cheap
Yes.
now.
At the time, COVID was a strange time and there's lots of uncertainty. So at the time when they put in those blocks, yes, I did support that because we didn't know. We know a lot more now, I think, and so I think we've got a better understanding. So certainly if that came back again, we'd have a different conversation around that, and I would want to make sure that we'd only do that if it's medically required, or that the risk, if it was a different disease, for example, of some sort, the risk was very unknown. That's why it was done, but if it's known, then people should be able to have these choices, not be so impacted.
Right. To get things moving along, I'll just say yes.
Yes.
Yes for me.
Yep.
Yes from me.
Yes.
Thank you. This brings us to the end of the formal question and answer session with everybody. I'd like to thank the audience for coming along. You've been absolutely great. It's been a very respectful process. And I'd also like to thank the candidates for handling the questions and doing their presentations in a completely professional way. Very impressed. And there are a few questions that left over, and I just, people who did not get their questions asked, if you want to ask a particular candidate after the session, please feel free to do so. I'm sure they'll be willing to accommodate you. But thank you for a wonderful evening. Cheers.
The Tawa Residents Association have a meet the candidates on Wednesday 29th as well, so if you did miss out, could be a good one to come to.
And I want to jump in and say, on Tuesday, there's 1841 is having a candidates meeting, so if you want to do this over a beer, on Wednesday in the community centre next door, the regional council candidates meeting is happening at 7:30, and on Saturday, this next Saturday, same place, same time, all the mayoral candidates will be here, and we can do this. You can ask those difficult questions of them. So good on you for coming, and thank you.
Sorry, Tawa meeting is on 28th, not 29th.